So to begin with, I'm going to start with a description of the site, which is essentially what is surrounding the target before we jump down into specifics, and then also the contextual data that answers a number of different questions about moksha. When we originally described this site, it's a fence or a grid around a place. This acts as a barrier. It collects and traps people, things, or objects. This is actually an innocent planet that is being used in an unintended way, and this meters the flow and acts as a checkpoint and an access point for an external force. One viewer described it as similar to hocus pocus in a way of its energetics that the viewer wasn't familiar with. And it's occurring on a crowded planet. It's a deliberate function that acts as a cage. People have been dispersed here, and a form of perverted injustice is occurring. A third viewer described it as a large naturally formed object like a planet that acts as an animal pen. This is a refugee camp tucked away out of sight, and a magnetic force. It stirs, agitates, and it works in a cylindrical manner, like clockwork over a long expanse of time. In my session, my work described a planetary system that's extremely crowded and jammed. Ghostly voices are flooding into this place, and it's incredibly harrowing for them. It's a bone-chilling experience. As a viewer, when I remote viewed this, I had descriptions that it made me upset in the session. It elicited contempt for what was going on at the site. But the activity at the site was this concept of a net that's been spun, and it's an operation of catch and release on a grand scale. So there's a massive grid that exists around this planet, and it acts as a checkpoint, a waypoint, or a rest stop where souls are drained, and then that in turn energizes something else. So very, very specific information about souls, about the clockwork nature over a long expanse of time, as well as this collecting, trapping, and then re-releasing. All this information came in. Okay, what's going on locally here? And the fact that it's the entire planet. The process works is that Earth is shielded by a companion object. Now, we're not sure if this is a physical thing. I mean, we're dealing with a type, if this is a technology, it's a type of technology that's so far beyond what humans can even probably comprehend. It may as well be magic. I mean, it makes sense why one viewer probably uses this word, hocus pocus. It's so far beyond his own lexicon that it may as well be magic. So whether this is a physical object or not, we're really not entirely certain. It would make sense that it's not physical, but you can make a couple different, I suppose, educated guesses. Maybe it exists in a phased state, a different dimension, where this object is, this companion object that creates this net. We're really not quite sure, but it's most likely because we don't have the vocabulary or the comprehension to even understand how it exists in this state. So we're going to use words that we can understand, the mechanical aspect of it, the energetic aspect of it, the acting like a net, things like that. First viewer said it's a companion object to Earth. It's something that's powerful and magnetic, and it squeezes tightly around the globe. Another viewer describes it as a magnetic vice that is attached around a large place. It's a mechanical process that incorporates destructive chemicals, and an individual undergoes bombardment as they pass through this system. And the people that pass through, they feel lost. They don't have an understanding of what's going on, kind of associated with the losing of memories would make sense. But they have this desire that seems to remain consistent through them, even though through this feeling of lost. More work describes that it's a little bit more specific. It actually gets the information point that these are souls that are being bent back towards the planet, and that the information, the closest analogy was kind of like gravitational lensing, where if your soul is light, instead of kind of shooting off after you die off the planet, off to somewhere else in the universe, what's occurring is there's a artificial structure that is lensing or curving your light back down to Earth again. And then every time this occurs, it's constantly lensed or pulled back. It shows that this is an activity, is powering a massive rotating object that visually appears like an axle in space. It's fluctuating and absorbing energy that's created by this lensing effect. So the act of actually creating the lensing of sending the light soul back to Earth generates energy inside of this large structure. And it seems to be, I mean, there's chemicals that seem to be involved, at least that's our vocabulary to describe what's going on. Something's being bombarded, there's a destructive process, which I'll get into a little bit further in the work, but there's actually a fracturing that occurs to force this light, this soul, to kind of come back down to the planet again for a second, third, infinite amount of times. But ultimately that's powering something else.